Modern age is a period in human history which spans from the 20th century, beginning with the period after the end of the World War I and ending with the advent of the digital revolution. During the Second World War, the world began to move into a technical but more destructive age. Many people were disillusioned by the life after World War I and II. Many American writers became expatriates and left US. Gertrude Stein called them the lost generation. After World War II, women struggled for equality and achieved a mixed record of success. In the early 1960s, many changes were developing for women's equality in employment and education. The number of working women had risen to 35% of the workforce, with increasing numbers of married women. Prominent writers of the modern age are Franz Kafka, D.H. Lawrence, Virginia Woolf, T.S. Eliot, and W.B. Yeats. However, we will only discuss Virginia Woolf. Virginia Woolf came to life in the Victorian era. She was born Adeline Virginia Stephen in London. Father Leslie Stephen was an eminent Victorian man of letters. He wrote books in various disciplines. She grew up in a literary and intellectual atmosphere with free access to her father's library. As normal at that period, Virginia Stephens did not receive a formal education as it was the case for girls in the Victorian era.
She grew up in a very Victorian household, despite the fact she was born in 1882, very near the end of the century. And she basically, until the death of her father, lived under quite Victorian circumstances and disliked them intensely.
She and her sister Vanessa, with whom she was close all her life, had to make with an at-home education while her brothers were sent to expensive schools.
She was very close, particularly to her sister, because both her brothers were sent away to school, but she remained at home. And her sister Vanessa, very early on, decided she wanted to be a painter, and Virginia, perhaps wanting also to have a route, decided that she was to be the writer.
A series of deaths in her family, especially her mother's, and sexual abuse by her stepbrother deeply marked Virginia Stephens' life and led to depression. In 1985, she suffered from her first of numerous nervous breakdowns.
There was obviously some very traumatic sexual interference going on, and there is a school of thought that argues that her life is dominated by childhood sexual abuse. I am not of that opinion because I don't read her life as that of a victim.
Virginia Woolf is certainly worth reading. You are likely to learn a lot about the way people think, feel, and develop strange obsessions from spending time with her characters. Virginia Woolf was a great experimenter. She is known for using stream of consciousness in her writing. In her writings, visual and auditory impressions are created by the fusion of stylistic virtuosity and intense lyricism. She was highly aware of the mental and material realm of reality. In her writings, the two realms have meeting points. She uses a technique in her novels. To the Lighthouse, Mrs. Dalloway, and The Waves. In 1941, the Second World War increased her anxiety and fears. After rewriting drafts of her suicide note, she put rocks into her pockets and drowned herself in the river Ouse.
Because she could swim very well, and the instinct of a person drowning must be to save themselves. She was wearing a heavy overcoat and put a stone in the pocket, but all the same she forced herself to die in the cold water of the river. One of the most gallant, in a way, actions of our whole life.